Hi everyone, I hope your day was gentle, even if it carried little storms. Tonight, I invite you to breathe, to loosen your shoulders, and allow me to take you into a story where music and love meet under the quiet moon. They say the heart can hear melodies before the ears do, and the first time I heard his piano, my heart woke up in ways I had forgotten. Now, as you close your eyes and prepare to drift into rest, remember to lock your door, and if your window is open, close it gently. The night feels safer when everything around you is calm. I was 52 when I first heard the piano echoing through the evening air. It was not a professional stage, not a grand concert, but the back corner of a small cafe in our town, tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop. I had stopped by after work that evening, feeling the heaviness of another long day, when I heard it, the music that would later change everything. His fingers touched the keys as though he were speaking secrets, secrets only the heart could understand. I sat with my tea, closing my eyes, letting the notes fall like warm rain over me. Each note was tender, fragile, yet strong enough to hold me in place. I remember thinking, this sound feels like coming home. When I opened my eyes, I saw him. He looked no older than 27, his shoulders slightly hunched over the piano as though protecting it, his eyes closed, lost in a world only he knew. And I watched, quietly, afraid to move, as if even my breath might disturb the spell he was weaving. The world around me slowed. The cafe's chatter, the sound of cups, the soft hum of conversation, all of it faded until it was just him, the piano, and me. I whispered to myself, who is he? Later, as the cafe emptied, I lingered, not ready to leave. He packed his sheet music slowly, carefully, as though each page were fragile. I thought of saying something, of thanking him, but my voice stayed silent. Instead, I watched him walk out into the night. The door closed behind him, leaving me in the soft glow of the cafe lights. For reasons I couldn't explain, I felt as though I had just let something precious slip away. That night, as I lay in bed, the music followed me. Every key, every pause, every rise and fall of sound, it replayed in my mind until I drifted into the deepest sleep I had known in months. The next evening, I found myself back at the cafe, almost without deciding. My hands carried me there. And again, he was there. His piano filled the room, and I found the same table, the same cup of tea, the same sense of warmth. This time, I promised myself I wouldn't just watch. When he finished, I clapped softly, the only one left in the room. His eyes finally lifted, and for the first time, they met mine. They were the kind of eyes that seemed to hold stories, young, yet old at the same time. He smiled, shyly, and nodded before gathering his music. I don't know why, but my heart skipped, as though I had been waiting for that simple glance for years. That night, I sat by my window before bed, the stars scattered across the sky like spilled sugar, and I whispered to myself, tomorrow. I'll say something tomorrow. And with that thought, I fell asleep, the melody of his piano cradling me. Sometimes, life offers us unexpected music, and when it does, we must listen closely. Because hidden in those notes may be the beginning of something that heals us, even when we believe it's too late. Sleep gently tonight, and remember, your story is still being written. Sometimes, the smallest decision, like speaking a single word, can open doors we never knew were waiting for us. Now, as you listen, Take a slow breath. In and out. Tonight, let your thoughts settle gently. Relax your head on your pillow. Close your window if it's still open, lock your door softly, and let the world outside fade away. This story is meant to carry you into rest. The next evening came like a gentle tide, and I found myself walking back toward the cafe once again. It felt almost silly, me, a woman of 52, retracing my steps like a schoolgirl with a secret crush. And yet, my heart was light, expectant, as though it knew something my mind had not yet understood. When I entered, the air was warm with the smell of fresh bread and coffee. There he was, already seated at the piano, his fingers stretching, preparing. And then, he began. The notes rose slowly, softly, like the first light of morning spilling over a quiet street. I sat in the same corner, my hands wrapped around a cup of chamomile tea, letting myself be carried away once more. But tonight, I promised myself something different. Tonight, I would not leave without speaking. When he finished, I clapped again, a little louder this time. His eyes lifted, and this time, instead of looking away, I smiled. To my surprise, he smiled back, warm and unguarded. My heart beat faster, though I tried to steady it. I waited as he gathered his music, folding the sheets with careful hands. My palms were damp with nervousness. I thought, what if he thinks I'm strange? What if I ruin this fragile moment? But still, I stood. "You play beautifully," I said softly, almost whispering. He paused, looking up at me. His eyes held mine in that quiet space between us, and then he smiled again. "Thank you," he replied, his voice low, calm. "It means a lot to hear that." Just like that, the silence broke into something new. I sat back down, and to my surprise, he came closer, resting his sheet music on the chair beside me. "Do you always come here?" he asked. "Not always," I admitted, "but lately, yes." He chuckled gently, the sound like the first crackle of a fireplace. I thought maybe I was imagining it. "I noticed you the other night." His words startled me. He noticed me. It was a strange, delicate feeling to realize that while I had been watching him, he had also been aware of me. "My name is Daniel," he said, extending his hand. I hesitated only a second before taking it. His hand was warm, steady, and young, yet it held something gentle, something respectful. "I'm Evelyn," I said quietly. "It's nice to meet you." From that moment, something shifted. He asked me what I liked about his music, and I told him honestly that it felt like listening to a soul speaking without words. He laughed softly, saying he never thought of it that way, but he liked the idea. We spoke only for a few minutes, but in those minutes, I felt lighter, as though I had stepped into a world where age and years did not matter, where only music and hearts existed. When he finally excused himself to leave, I watched him go, a small ache blooming in my chest. But this time, instead of silence, I had his name. Daniel. That night, as I lay in bed, I whispered it to myself like a lullaby. "Daniel." And the music followed, softer now, as if my heart had already begun to carry it on its own. The following days became a rhythm. Work, then the cafe. Tea, then his piano. Smiles exchanged, short conversations that grew just a little longer each time. I began to notice things, how his brow furrowed slightly when he lost himself in a difficult piece, how his lips pressed together when he tried to remember a note, how his whole body seemed to breathe with the piano. And he, too, seemed to notice me. He asked about my work, my favorite books, the places I liked to walk. His curiosity was genuine, and his listening was patient. Still, a part of me held back. I was older, so much older. And though nothing in his gaze suggested judgment, I could not silence the small voice in my mind that whispered, "This is not meant for you." But the heart does not listen to rules. One night, as I sat by the window before sleep, I thought I heard music drifting faintly from the distance. I leaned out, the cool night brushing against my skin, and there it was, a piano, somewhere far but close enough to reach me. My heart quickened. Could it be him, practicing somewhere nearby? I smiled to myself, closing the window gently, locking it as always. Then I returned to bed, whispering softly, "Good night, Daniel," before letting sleep take me. Every word we dare to speak is like a key, unlocking doors we never knew existed. Don't be afraid to speak your truth, even if it trembles, because your voice may open the way to something beautiful. Tonight, rest with courage, and let your dreams be filled with gentle music. Some hearts speak louder in silence than in words, and when Daniel looked at me that evening, I felt as though he had read a chapter of my soul. Now, take a deep breath with me. In and out. Tonight, let your thoughts soften. Rest your head comfortably, loosen your shoulders, and remember, you are safe here. Close your window gently, lock your door softly, and let your mind rest while this story carries you into dream. It became our rhythm, Daniel and I. Evening after evening, I returned to the cafe, and each night, his music seemed to change. At first, it was soft and searching, like a question carried on the wind. But then, as the days passed, it grew warmer, fuller, as though the piano itself was smiling. One evening, after his set was finished, Daniel walked directly to my table instead of packing his music first. He sat across from me, his smile faint but sure. "I tried something new tonight," he said. "Did you notice?" I nodded. The piece was brighter. It felt lighter, like sunlight after rain. His eyes lit up, and for a moment, he looked almost boyish, like a child proud of showing someone a hidden drawing. That's exactly what I was hoping for. It was then I realized something. He wasn't just playing for himself anymore. He was playing for me. We talked longer that night. He asked me about my favorite songs, and I confessed that I hadn't listened to live music in years. Life had gotten busy, quiet, and in many ways, lonely. He tilted his head, studying me. "Then maybe this is exactly what you needed." His words were simple, but they landed deep, like stones falling into still water. I smiled, but inside, my heart ached with both joy and fear. I was old enough to be his mother. What could this possibly be? A friendship? A fleeting moment? Or something neither of us had planned for? When I left the cafe that evening, the air was cool and damp. A soft mist had rolled in from the nearby river, wrapping the town in silver haze. Daniel walked with me to the street, carrying his sheet music under his arm. "Do you live far?" he asked. "Not too far," I said. "A few blocks down." He nodded, then paused, looking at me as though weighing whether to speak again. "Would you like me to walk you?" My first instinct was to decline. I didn't want to seem needy, didn't want to complicate this delicate balance between us. But something in his gaze was so genuine, so kind, that I found myself whispering, "Yes, I'd like that." So, we walked. Slowly, quietly, through the misty streets. The lamps glowed above us, halos of light stretching into the fog. The sound of our footsteps was the only rhythm, steady and calm. As we reached the gate to my small apartment building, Daniel stopped. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" I asked, surprised. "For listening. For being here." His eyes met mine, and I felt that silence again, the silence that seemed fuller than words. I wanted to say something, anything, but the weight of the moment pressed gently against my chest, and all I could do was nod. He smiled, gave a small wave, and disappeared back into the mist. I stood there for a long while, my hand resting on the cool iron gate, my heart fluttering in ways it hadn't in years. That night, I couldn't sleep easily. His music haunted me, yes, but it was his eyes that returned again and again in the quiet darkness. I turned, I sighed, I pressed my cheek to the pillow, whispering to myself, "This is nothing. This is just friendship. Just music. Don't be foolish." But my heart hummed its own melody, one I couldn't silence. The next evening, I returned to the cafe again. But tonight, something was different. The seat at the piano was empty. His music sheets weren't there. The cafe was filled with the ordinary chatter of customers, the clinking of cups, but no piano, no Daniel. I sat, waiting. 10 minutes passed. 20. The tea in my cup grew cold, untouched. My heart beat strangely, filled with an unease I didn't understand. Finally, I asked the waitress, "Is the pianist not coming tonight?" She looked at me with a small shrug. "Daniel. He comes most nights. Maybe something came up." I nodded, forcing a smile, but inside, my chest tightened. Something felt off. When I walked home that night, the mist was thicker than before, curling around my ankles like smoke. I wrapped my coat tighter, whispering into the night, "Please be all right, Daniel." Sometimes, life teaches us patience through absence. When something or someone matters, their silence speaks as loudly as their presence. Trust the pauses in your journey, for they, too, are part of the music of life. Tonight, let your heart rest in that truth, and may your dreams be gentle. Sometimes, it's not the sound we miss the most, but the silence that follows when someone we care for is gone. Now, before we continue, take a deep breath. Let your shoulders drop, let your jaw soften, and remind yourself it's time to rest. Close your window, lock your door softly, and allow the night to feel safe around you. This story will carry you gently, even through its quiet mysteries. The cafe felt different without Daniel. The chatter of the people seemed louder, the clinking of cups sharper, and the air felt heavy, as though something essential was missing. I sat with my tea, staring at the piano bench, waiting as though he might appear any moment. But he didn't. Night after night, I returned. 1 night, 2 nights, 3. Still no Daniel. The waitress noticed me looking toward the piano again. He hasn't been in for a while, she said kindly. Maybe he's traveling, or maybe he needed a break. Her words were simple, but they did nothing to calm the worry building in my chest. I wanted to ask more, but I realized I didn't know enough about him. No phone number, no address, just his name, his music, and the memory of his smile in the mist. It was strange, wasn't it? To miss someone so deeply when you barely knew them. And yet, the quiet ache was undeniable. One evening, after another night without his music, I walked home slowly, my thoughts heavy. The mist was lighter this time, the air cooler. I tried to tell myself I was being foolish, that I had let my imagination run away with me. But when I reached my apartment gate, I paused. For there, sitting on the steps, was Daniel. My breath caught. He was hunched slightly, his sheet music in his lap, though he wasn't reading it. His hands rested loosely on the pages, his eyes distant. When he looked up and saw me, his expression softened instantly. "Evelyn," he said quietly, almost with relief. I moved closer, my heart racing. "Daniel, you weren't at the cafe." I thought maybe." He shook his head quickly, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to worry you." I sat beside him on the step, the cool stone beneath us grounding me. "Are you all right?" I asked gently. He hesitated before answering, his gaze dropping to his hands. "I just needed time. Some things, they get heavy sometimes." I didn't press. His voice carried a weight, a softness that asked me not to push further. Instead, I simply nodded. "I understand." And we sat there, side by side, in silence. Not the lonely kind of silence, but the kind that felt safe, as though neither of us needed words. After a while, he turned to me. "You know," he said softly, "playing at the cafe was just a way to practice. I never expected anyone to actually listen." I smiled gently, but I did. His eyes met mine, warm and searching. "Yes, you did." For a moment, time stilled. The city around us faded, the world shrank until it was just us on that step. And though no words were spoken, something passed between us, a quiet thread, fragile and unspoken, but real. That night, before we parted, Daniel said, "Would you like to hear something tomorrow? Not at the cafe. Somewhere quieter." My heart stirred. "Where?" He smiled faintly. "There's an old music hall near the edge of town. It's mostly empty now. No one goes there anymore. But there's a piano, and I'd like to play for you." I hesitated, feeling both excitement and an unfamiliar nervousness. But something in his voice was steady, sincere. "Yes," I said softly. "I'd like that very much." When I lay in bed that night, I could barely close my eyes. His absence had left me restless, but his return, his invitation, filled me with a new kind of anticipation. My heart was alive again, awake in ways I hadn't felt for years. As sleep finally pulled me under, I whispered to myself, "Tomorrow, I will hear his music again." Life has a way of returning what we fear we've lost, often when we least expect it. Trust that what is meant for you will find you, even in silence. Tonight, let go of worry, and rest in the gentle truth that tomorrow always carries hope. Sometimes, love doesn't knock on your door, it waits quietly in forgotten places, asking if you're brave enough to step inside. Now, breathe with me. In, and out. Rest your head gently, let your mind slow down, and remember, you are safe here. If your window is still open, close it softly. Lock your door, loosen your shoulders, and allow the story to cradle you into calmness. The next evening arrived with a quiet anticipation humming through my chest. After work, instead of turning toward the cafe, I followed Daniel's directions to the edge of town. The streets grew quieter, the buildings older, until I reached it, an abandoned music hall, its grand doors faded but still standing proud. The air smelled faintly of rain and old wood. I pushed the door open, its hinges creaking, and stepped inside. The hall was vast, filled with shadows and dust, yet beautiful in its silence. Tall windows lined the walls, their glass streaked with time, letting in soft evening light. Rows of empty seats stretched before me, and at the center of the stage, there it was. A piano. And Daniel. He stood beside it, waiting, his music sheets laid carefully on the stand. When he saw me, his expression shifted into a quiet smile. "You came." "Of course," I whispered, my voice swallowed by the size of the hall. He motioned for me to sit near the front, not in the far rows but close enough to feel every note. The wood of the chair was cool beneath me as I settled in. Then, Daniel sat at the piano. When his fingers touched the keys, the sound filled the hall, not like the cafe, where conversations dulled the edges. Here, the music was unbroken, whole, and alive. The notes echoed against the walls, rising and falling like a tide, filling every empty corner with warmth. It was a love song. I didn't know the title, but my heart recognized it instantly. It wasn't written on paper, it was written in him, in the way his eyes closed, in the way his shoulders leaned into each note. And though the hall was empty, I felt as though he was playing only for me. Tears gathered at the corners of my eyes before I even realized it. Not sad tears, but the kind that come when beauty overwhelms you, when something touches the very core of your being. When the final note lingered, then faded into silence, Daniel opened his eyes slowly. Our gazes met across the space, and I knew he had seen my tears. "Evelyn," he said softly, his voice carrying across the hall, "that one was for you." My breath caught, and for a long moment, I could not speak. All I could do was hold his gaze, letting the silence between us say everything my lips could not. Afterward, he joined me in the front row. The dust on the seats didn't seem to matter. He sat close, his shoulder brushing mine, his presence warm. "You know," he said quietly, "most people don't understand why I play. They think it's practice, or habit. But for me, it's survival." I turned to him gently. "Survival?" He nodded. "Music keeps me breathing. Without it, I don't know who I am." His eyes lowered, shadows flickering across his expression. "But lately, playing has felt different. Like I'm not alone anymore." His words were simple, but they struck something inside me. I had been alone for so long, too. And yet, here, in this forgotten hall, with this young man beside me, I felt anything but alone. We sat there until the light outside dimmed into twilight. Dust swirled like tiny stars in the fading glow, the hall breathing with silence again. Finally, I whispered, "Thank you, Daniel, for trusting me with this." He turned to me, his eyes deep and steady. "No," he said softly. "Thank you for listening when no one else did." Our hands brushed then, just for a second. His fingers grazed mine, not deliberate, but enough to spark something warm, something undeniable. Neither of us pulled away. When I walked home later that evening, the world felt transformed. The stars above seemed brighter, the night air gentler. I carried his music with me, every note still alive inside my chest. And for the first time in years, I felt like tomorrow wasn't just another day, it was a promise. Sometimes, the most beautiful chapters of our lives are hidden in forgotten places, waiting for us to be brave enough to enter. Trust that love and light can find you anywhere, even in the quiet corners of the world. Tonight, rest knowing your story still holds music yet to be played. Every heart carries secrets, but sometimes, all it takes is one listener to give those secrets the courage to speak. Before we begin, take a slow breath. In and out. Relax your hands, unclench your jaw, let the day fall away. Close your windows softly, lock your door gently, and know that you are safe. This story will guide you deeper into calm. The next evening, I returned to the old music hall. My steps were lighter, as though the air itself carried me. I opened the heavy wooden doors and found Daniel already there, sitting on the edge of the stage with his sheet music beside him. He looked up as I entered, and the way his face softened, like sunlight breaking through clouds, made my heart skip. "You came," he said, his voice almost a whisper, as though he hadn't been sure. "I told you I would," I replied gently. "And I meant it." He led me to the piano again, but this time, he didn't play right away. Instead, he rested his hands on the keys without pressing them, his eyes distant. "I want to tell you something," he said slowly. I nodded, waiting, sensing the heaviness in his tone. He took a breath. "I wasn't supposed to stay here. I came to this town just for a short while, to get away from everything. My life back home," he paused, shaking his head. "It's complicated." I tilted my head, urging him softly. "You don't have to tell me everything, Daniel. Not if it's too much." But he looked at me then, his gaze steady. "No, I want to. Because you've been listening to more than just my music." The silence stretched. Dust floated lazily through the shafts of light from the tall windows. His voice lowered. "My family, they wanted me to stop playing. They said music was a waste, that it would never build me a future. They wanted me to follow a path I couldn't bear. So, I left. I've been drifting ever since, playing where I can, surviving however I can." I felt my chest tighten at his words. So young, yet already burdened with choices heavier than most shoulders could carry. "Music is all I have," he whispered. "But when you listen, when you sit there and really hear me, it feels like maybe it's enough. Maybe I'm enough." My throat ached, my heart trembling with quiet empathy. Slowly, without thinking, I reached across the piano and placed my hand over his. His skin was warm beneath mine, his fingers still against the keys. "You are enough, Daniel," I said softly. "More than enough." For a long time, neither of us moved. His hand under mine stayed still, but I could feel the faintest tremor, as though my words had shaken something loose inside him. Finally, he whispered, "Thank you." And then, he began to play. This song was different from the others. It started softly, almost fragile, as though unsure of itself. But then it grew, stronger and fuller, notes rising and swelling until they filled every corner of the hall. It was raw, unpolished, but breathtaking in its honesty. And I knew this was his heart speaking. When the final note lingered, then dissolved into silence, I found tears sliding down my cheeks again. Not of sadness, but of recognition. He had given me his truth, and I had heard it. Afterward, we sat together in the front row again, the quiet wrapping around us like a blanket. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked gently. "Leaving?" He shook his head slowly. "No, but sometimes. I wonder if I'll ever find where I truly belong." I turned to him, my voice tender. Maybe belonging isn't about a place. Maybe it's about a person. His eyes met mine, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence grew heavy with something unspoken, something that pulsed between us like a quiet heartbeat. That night, when I walked home, my steps were slower, thoughtful. The stars above seemed to shimmer more brightly than usual, as though they too had listened to his confession. I lay in bed, his music replaying in my mind, his words echoing, "Maybe I'll never find where I belong." And I whispered into the dark, though he couldn't hear me, "Maybe you already have." Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is share the truth of who we are. And sometimes, the kindest thing we can do is simply listen. Tonight, remember you are enough, exactly as you are. Rest gently, and let the silence remind you of your worth. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with thunder. It tiptoes in, like a whisper you almost didn't hear, until it fills your entire heart. Take a deep, calm breath. Inhale slowly, and exhale gently. Let the weight of today sink into the bed beneath you. Your only task now is to listen, breathe, and drift into peace. The next evening, I found myself hurrying to the hall as though my feet already knew the way. When I stepped inside, the air felt different, warmer, softer, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting. Daniel was there, sitting at the piano, but this time he wasn't playing. He was staring at the keys as though they carried answers he couldn't quite reach. He looked up at me, and a smile flickered across his face. A smile that wasn't just polite, it was relief. "You came," he whispered again, as if each time I returned, it surprised him. I smiled gently. "Of course I did." He shifted, patting the bench beside him. "Sit with me tonight. Not out there, here." For a moment, my heart faltered. Sitting beside him meant sharing the space where his soul lived, the piano, the very breath of his being. But something inside me said yes before doubt could whisper no. Saturday. The warmth of his shoulder was near mine, not touching, but close enough that I could feel it. He rested his hands on the keys, but instead of beginning, he asked softly, "Do you want to play something?" I laughed quietly. "Me? I can barely string a melody." "That's all right," he said, tilting his head. "Music isn't about perfection. It's about honesty. Just try." So I did. My fingers trembled over the keys, clumsy and uncertain. The sounds I made were broken, uneven, like a child learning to speak. But when I looked at him, Daniel wasn't laughing. He was watching me with a softness that made my chest ache. "You're listening to yourself," he whispered. "That's the first step." I shook my head, smiling. "I sound terrible." But he leaned closer, his voice low, almost a secret. "You sound real." After a moment, he placed his hand gently over mine on the keys, guiding my fingers. The contact was light, but it sent warmth rushing through me. Together, we pressed a few notes, soft and harmonious. "See," he said, his voice barely above the sound of the piano. "When we play together, it feels whole." I looked at our hands, his long, delicate fingers over mine, guiding, steady. And something inside me shifted, slow but undeniable. It wasn't just admiration anymore. It was something deeper. Something I hadn't felt in years, something I thought I had lost forever. When the last note faded, he didn't move his hand right away. Neither did I. We sat in that silence, the kind of silence that says more than words ever could. Finally, he turned to me. His eyes searched mine, hesitant yet hopeful. "Evelyn," he whispered, my name trembling on his lips like a fragile melody. "Can I tell you something?" I nodded, my breath caught in my chest. He hesitated, then smiled, a little shy, a little brave. "When you're here, I don't feel lost anymore." The words settled in the air between us, heavy and beautiful. My throat tightened, my eyes stinging with unshed tears. Slowly, I reached up and brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, a gesture so natural it surprised me. "You're not lost, Daniel," I said softly. "Not anymore." That night, I didn't rush home. I lingered in the hall long after the stars had appeared outside. We didn't speak much after that moment. We didn't need to. We just sat together, the piano silent between us, our hands close enough to almost touch again. When I finally left, his words followed me, echoing gently in my heart. "When you're here, I don't feel lost anymore." And for the first time in years, I realized I didn't feel lost either. Love doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers softly in the spaces between words, in the brush of a hand, in the silence of understanding. Tonight, may you feel that same gentle love, steady, quiet, and enough. Sleep peacefully, knowing you are never truly lost. Love can feel like a song you don't remember learning, yet somehow you know all the words. Take a deep breath with me. Inhale gently, and let it go slowly. Feel your body sink deeper into rest. Tonight's chapter is soft, like the sound of rain against glass, and as you listen, let your thoughts loosen and drift like leaves on water. The next few days were quiet ones, though my heart was anything but. Every evening, I found myself thinking of Daniel. His words replayed in my mind. "When you're here, I don't feel lost anymore." Such a simple sentence, yet it had settled into me like roots, impossible to pull out. I would sit by my window with a cup of tea, staring at the night sky, wondering why this young man had stirred something inside me I thought had long gone to sleep. One night, I asked myself aloud, "Is it love?" The question startled me. At 52, I thought I knew what love looked like. It was companionship, routine, safety. But what I felt with Daniel was different. It was raw, unpolished, new, like discovering a forgotten song that suddenly played in my soul. Yet doubt whispered too. Was I simply enchanted by his music, by the way his hands spoke across the piano keys? Was this just loneliness dressing itself in romance? The following evening, I went to the hall as usual. Daniel was waiting, his hands poised above the piano as though he had been rehearsing for my arrival. When he saw me, his face lit up in a way that made my doubts stumble. "Play for me," I said softly, sitting in my usual seat. He nodded and began. The melody he chose was unlike the others. It wasn't sorrowful, nor was it bright, it was something in between. Gentle, questioning, filled with pauses as though the piano itself was unsure of the next note. And as he played, I realized he was speaking without words. He was asking me something, though his lips never moved. I closed my eyes, letting the sound wash over me. Each note pressed against the walls of my heart, as if knocking, waiting to be let in. When the last note lingered and faded, silence filled the hall. Daniel looked up, his expression open, vulnerable. "Did you hear it?" he asked. I tilted my head. "Hear what?" "The question," he whispered. "I was asking you something, through the music." I smiled faintly. "And what was the question?" His voice was quiet, almost trembling. "Do you feel it too?" The air in the hall thickened, charged yet soft. My chest tightened. I could lie, dismiss it as imagination, as the dreamy pull of music. But when I looked at him, I saw truth, pure and unguarded. I lowered my gaze, tracing the lines of the piano with my fingers. "I don't know," I admitted. "I feel something, but I don't know if it's love or just the beauty of your music holding me." He didn't flinch, didn't look away. Instead, he leaned closer, his voice steady but tender. "Music can't create something that isn't there, Evelyn. It can only reveal it." The silence stretched between us, heavy yet soothing, like the pause before rain begins to fall. My heart whispered an answer I wasn't ready to say aloud. Instead, I reached out and pressed a single note on the piano. A soft, lingering sound. He smiled, understanding without needing words. That night, I left the hall with my heart unsteady but alive. For the first time in years, my steps felt lighter, my breath fuller. Yet the question lingered, echoing through me. "Do you feel it too?" Sometimes the heart awakens in ways we don't expect, in moments we can't explain. When doubts whisper, remember this. Feelings are not mistakes, they are signs that we are alive. Tonight, rest knowing your heart is still capable of wonder. Sometimes the hardest part of love is not what you feel in your heart, but what you fear others will say about it. Close your eyes now, take in a deep, calming breath, and let it out slowly. Let the worries of the day melt from your shoulders. This chapter will guide you gently, like a slow walk beneath the stars. The morning after Daniel's question still echoed in my chest, I sat at my kitchen table with untouched coffee, staring out the window. My neighbor, Linda, was walking her dog, waving kindly as she passed. I waved back, but inside me was a storm of thoughts. What would Linda say? I wondered, if she knew I spent my nights in a music hall with a man 25 years younger. Would she whisper behind closed doors? Would she pity me, or worse, laugh? Later that day, I visited a friend for lunch. She asked me about my evenings, how I'd been spending my time. I smiled softly and spoke of long walks, of quiet nights at home. I didn't mention Daniel. It wasn't shame, not exactly. It was more fragile than that. It was the need to protect something tender and new, like shielding a flame from the wind. Yet as I sat there, half listening to her words, I realized the truth. I didn't want the world's opinions to touch what Daniel and I had found. That evening, I returned to the hall. He was waiting, as always. When I stepped inside, his face brightened as though the dim lights themselves had awakened. "You're here," he whispered. "Yes," I said, my voice quieter than usual. "But Daniel, I need to ask you something." He tilted his head, his hands hovering above the piano keys. "Anything. What if people knew?" I asked, my throat tight. "What if they saw us together? What would they say?" He paused, then leaned back slightly, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe they would talk. Maybe they wouldn't understand. But Evelyn," his gaze met mine, steady, grounding. "Does their voice matter more than your heart?" The hall was silent except for the echo of his words. I wanted to say yes, that the world's voice mattered, that age and difference mattered. But when I looked at him, I felt something unshakable. I whispered, "I don't know." Daniel smiled faintly, his fingers finally touching the keys. A soft melody filled the air, slow and delicate, like footsteps on fresh snow. "This is what I know," he said over the music. "When you're here, everything feels right. That has to mean something." I closed my eyes, letting his words and music intertwine. My doubts didn't disappear, but they softened, like shadows under a gentle moon. For a long while, I simply listened. And in the quiet of that hall, I realized something important. The world beyond those walls could wait. What mattered was this moment, this music, this feeling that grew like dawn breaking over darkness. When the last note faded, Daniel looked at me, his expression calm but intent. "Evelyn, soon, you'll have to decide what this means to you. To us." His words lingered, like the final chord of a song that refused to vanish. That night, as I walked home under the stars, the question weighed on me heavier than before. The world was waiting, with its opinions and judgments. But my heart whispered, what if love is worth the risk? The world will always have its opinions, its doubts, its whispers. But your heart, it is yours alone. Tonight, as you rest, remember this. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is to listen to our own quiet truth. Every love story has a moment when the heart must decide to remain silent or to sing. Take one deep, steady breath in and let it go softly. Allow your mind to calm, your body to grow heavy against the bed. This chapter is the last, the soft closing of a book, the final brush of music before sleep. The days after Daniel's words felt different, as if the air itself carried more weight. I found myself caught between two worlds, the quiet hall where love felt possible, and the outside world where whispers could wound. But one evening, as I walked to the hall, I realized something simple. The choice was mine. The world could speak, neighbors could gossip, friends could raise their brows, but none of them lived inside my heart. Only I did. And Daniel. When I entered the hall that night, He was already at the piano. The light from the old chandelier caught in his hair, casting him in a soft golden glow. For a moment, I simply watched, memorizing him, his quiet strength, his patient smile, the way he seemed to breathe music even in silence. "Evelyn," he said when he saw me, his voice warm, expectant. I walked closer, my steps slow, deliberate. "Daniel," I whispered, my voice trembling, "I know my answer now." He turned fully toward me, his eyes wide, searching. "And what is it?" I placed my hand gently on the piano, my fingers brushing the cool keys. "I feel it too. What you asked me that night through your music, yes, I feel it too." For a moment, he didn't move. Then his shoulders eased, his smile breaking like sunlight after rain. "I hoped," he whispered, almost to himself. "I hoped you would say that." I sat beside him, and together, without a word, we began to play. My hands were clumsy, his were steady, but the music we made was ours. Imperfect, unpolished, but filled with truth. When the last note faded into silence, I didn't move away. I looked at him, and he at me, the world outside forgotten. "What will people say?" I asked softly, though the question felt smaller now, less frightening. He shook his head gently. "Let them say what they will. Music doesn't ask permission to exist. And neither does love." I smiled then, a slow, certain smile. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. That night, I left the hall with Daniel at my side. We walked together under the stars, the quiet street stretching before us like a promise. The world would speak, as it always did. But my heart had already chosen its song. Love, like music, does not need approval to be real. It exists in the quiet moments, in the honesty of our hearts, in the courage to embrace what feels true. Tonight, as you drift into sleep, remember your story, your song, belongs only to you. Rest gently, knowing love can find you at any time, in any place, when you least expect it.
Its voice reflects the silver moon, a whisper trails through twilight.